Hey everyone! Today I'm going to show you how to make a leprechaun hat and beard for a stuffed animal for St. Patrick's Day. This was a really fun idea someone suggested, and since St. Patrick's Day landed on a Friday, I figured I gotta get my act together and post on time. But this is still a fun project to do all year round. Now let's get started! I'm going to start with the leprechaun hat, and I'm going to be using green felt for this. That way I can sew this by hand and there won't be any frayed edges. And I have two patterns I haven't cut out yet, but one I already cut out is this long rectangle. This is 10 inches long and about 3 inches wide. And that's cut out of normal felt, but here I have a slightly thicker felt I'm going to use for the brim of the hat. But you can just use regular if you don't have it. Okay, so I'm going to cut out the brim first out of the thick felt. And as always, I'll have these linked in the description box. And for the inner circle, I'm folding it into a quarter circle and then cutting it out. I ended up having to smooth mine out a little. And then I'm cutting out the top of the hat with some regular felt. Next, I'm going to start sewing this together, so I already have my thread in my needle and I'm going to do a double knot at the end. And you could always use a sewing machine for this if you want, but I want to do some options without one. But I'm going to start with the rectangle piece and the top of the hat, and I want to lay them good side, but with felt it doesn't really matter. But you want the circle all the way to one side like this with the edges lined up. Then I'm putting my needle in through the back side, and for the next one I'm also going in through the back, and that'll have the thread loop over the top. And I can't remember what this stitch is called, but it's kind of my go-to when it comes to sewing felt pieces together. I just think it's easier than a lot of the other ones. Okay, I'm making sure to go the same distance away from the edge every time, and that'll just keep everything nice and even. But since you are sewing a circle to a rectangle, you'll just have to keep adjusting the circle so that edge is perfectly lined up. But yeah, now I can just keep doing that until I've gone almost all the way around the circle and reached the end of the rectangle. Okay, so I'm almost to the end, and I think I'll have the perfect amount sticking out to eventually sew the sides together. So I'm going to keep going until there's probably only about a 1/4 inch of that extra rectangle left. And since the other side was a little extra long too, I sewed more on that side. But now I can lock my stitch by just putting my needle through anywhere and then putting the needle through the loop that forms before pulling it all the way through. And then I'm going to do that twice to make the double knot. So that is the first step done. Now I need to sew the brim of the hat on. And since the whole of the hat is going to be smaller, since that's just kind of how leprechaun hats looked, I'm going to cut those open edges at an angle just a little bit. It's honestly optional, but now I can turn this inside out and line up the inner edge of the brim with that bottom edge of the hat. I'm going to make sure to start sewing not right at the very edge of the hat. I showed it really fast, so here's a slow-mo replay. I started sewing probably a little more than a 1/4 inch away from that side. So I'm going to do the same stitch as before, only entering in through one side. I kept doing that for a bit, but realized that even after trimming the hat piece, it still would be too much fabric to fit in the brim. So every so often, I'm going to kind of do a little bit of a pleat. So I'm going to just pinch the felt of the hat just like this, and then fold it over. So now when sewn together with the brim, it'll be really thick. But that way I'll be gradually making the hat piece a little smaller so it fits perfectly with the inside of the brim. So here's what it looks like from the front. It just looks like a little fold in the fabric, but there is going to be a belt covering this, so it won't be as noticeable. So every maybe 3 or 4 regular stitches, I'm going to do one of those little pleats, and I really just adjusted how much I was doing as I got to the end. So once I got further down, I compared to see how much fabric I had left, and I had been doing plenty of these pleats, so I actually didn't need to do any more. But every so often, you might want to just line up the edges to see how much extra there still is. Okay, so similar to the top piece, you want to keep going until there's maybe a 1/4 inch of each side still left, and then that'll be what we sew together. After locking my stitch, it will look like this, so it's got more of that tapered look like the reference photos. But now we still have to sew up that open back. I'm first turning it inside out and lining up those edges good side to good side. So now I'm just sewing that together starting at the top, and for some reason I used the back stitch at the beginning of this and then switched to the whip stitch, but now that I think about it, it wasn't really necessary. Once I've gone all the way to the bottom, I'm lining up the brim piece with that side seam and then sewing that together, and that should be it. Okay, now that is it for the base of this hat. The hardest part is over. Now it's just time to add the accessories. I'm going to be adding a black band and buckle at the bottom, and I'm using black felt since my ribbon wasn't thick enough. And now I'm cutting out a little buckle out of yellow felt. I'm going to be shaping this like an actual buckle and cutting out 2 rectangles on the inside, so there should be still one piece in the middle. So here's what it should end up looking like. And that way I don't have to attach it to the belt at all. All I have to do is slide it on like how an actual belt works. Now I just need to attach the belt to the hat. I'm going to be sewing this on, so I'm just going to do a basic running stitch, which is just going in and out of the fabric back and forth, starting on the bottom and then going all the way around, and then I'm going to go back and do the top edge. After I've made it all around the bottom edge, I'm going to go straight up in that back seam to close up the sides, and then I'm going to continue doing that around the top edge. Also, when I get to the buckle, I'm making sure not to sew over the yellow felt so you can't see it, but I'm trying to go over that middle part that's kind of hidden in the back. And after locking my stitch, this leprechaun hat is done. I'm going to try it on at the end, but next I'm going to be making a beard. I know this is kind of weird, but I just had the right materials for it, so figured I should just go for it. Here is the beard pattern I made. Not very detailed, and I didn't take much time for it because I'm going to be covering this up. But if you want to just make the beard out of felt, then I'd say maybe draw your own more detailed version based off of your stuffed animal. So after cutting this out of orange felt, I'm going to try it on my stuffed animal just to see if it's the right shape. I'm using Pickles the dinosaur here because he's green, his outfit's green, it's just perfect. And he doesn't have a mouth, but I think the mouth placement is pretty good. Okay, you can skip to adding the string if this is all you want to do, but I happen to have some leftover orange wool from making this cat, so I figured I should put this on to make it look a little more realistic. If you don't have this, you could maybe try using cotton balls and painting them with like orange watercolors. First, I'm getting a pretty long and thick piece to be kind of the mustache, and I'm going to be sewing this on, so I'm putting my needle in through the back right above the mouth, and then going over the middle of that tuft of wool and pulling it tight. Then I did that maybe 1 or 2 more times to really secure it. Now to do the rest of the beard, I'm doing a similar process, but with just like smaller pieces of wool. So I'm first taking a few and kind of thinning it out, but making sure the ends are all fluffy. And starting at the top, I'm sewing this on the same way, so just doing like 1 stitch around the middle, and then I can just keep repeating that for the rest. This mustache was reminding me so much of the Lorax, so if I ever had to dress up a stuffed animal as a Lorax, I know how to do it. I did not have much wool to work with, so I had to be really careful how many pieces I was putting on and how I spaced them out. Okay, here it is all filled out. I put the mustache back down to kind of cover the top, and now I just need to attach some strings so this stays on my stuffed animal. I just threaded a needle with embroidery floss, tied a knot at the end, and put it in through the front, and then in the back I'm going to lock the stitch like how I usually do to make sure it doesn't slide around. Okay, now I'm going to do the same thing to the other side so I can just tie it in the back and it can fit different stuffed animals. Okay, the last thing I'm going to do is give the beard a little trim just so it has more of a smooth shape. And after that, this leprechaun costume, you could call it, is finally done, so I'm going to put the beard on first. And at first I thought it was kind of horrifying, but you know, it's also funny. I'm honestly just proud I thought of a way to use that extra orange wool. Next, I can add the hat, and this is your finished leprechaun look. I feel like the suspenders just go so well with this, but really this could be for any stuffed animal with a green outfit or if they're already green. So yeah, this is my first ever St. Patrick's Day themed craft, so thank you to whoever suggested this. Please give this video a like, comment any more suggestions you have, and subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you next time! Bye!